I hope you're well rested and all ready for the roundtable discussion that follows, which will give us the chance to explore every nook and cranny of the BIAS project. BIAS is a 4-year project funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Programme that will empower the artificial intelligence and human resources management communities by addressing and mitigating algorithmic biases. After the discussion, you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions again. But before that, to talk about this project, we are very lucky to welcome 3 special guests. The first one is a professor of data engineering at the Bern University of Applied Sciences in Biel, co-leader of its generative AI lab and the research group Applied Machine Intelligence. In her research, she's investigating bias in word embeddings and language models with a focus on European languages and values. In this context, she is leading the corresponding task in the BIAS project. Please welcome Professor Mascha Kurpicz-Briki. Thank you. I'm going to say the name again because it was wrong. Mascha Kurpicz-Briki, sorry. Our second guest is Associate Professor and Director of Research at the ELO Center for Law and Digital Technologies at Leiden University. He's laureate of the European Research Council and investigates the legal and regulatory aspects of robots and AI technologies. His LinkedIn page says that he's interested in many things lately, in robots and AI, of course, healthcare, tech for good, diversity, future of law, and emotions in human-robot interaction. A big round of applause for Dr. Eduard Fosch. The last guest to join us is a PhD candidate at the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies of Culture in Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Her research deals with intersectionality and power in future imaginaries of artificial intelligence in the context work. In particular, she investigates AI perceptions and ethics in the area of human resources and recruitment in Italy. She's also taking part in the BIAS project that interests us today. Please welcome Mrs. Silvia Ecclesia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this very nice introduction. I'm happy to be here today to talk about the BIAS project, of course, but also from the technical perspective, a bit more about these societal biases that we find in word embeddings and large language models. We have very well seen before in the keynote how the societal stereotypes are reflected in the generative AI, illustrating it very visual with the generation of images. We experience similar problems also with language models, where sometimes it can be more apparent, like when we're generating texts that are reproducing the stereotypes. However, in many cases, it happens somewhere behind the scenes, when the language model are used for other tasks, like matchmaking, like generating suggestions, somewhere under the hood of a software, and we might not immediately know it. So that's why it's very relevant when, that we address this problem. From the research perspective. I first want to say just a few words on how actually these kind of AI models work. So when we talk about AI, what we typically mean are systems that are trained using machine learning. Machine learning, in the case of language model, means that we are building statistical models on how the different words or sentences in naturally human-produced texts relate to each other. So simplified, this means that we have a system that, based on probabilities, predicts the next word in a partial sentence. And that's how answers are generated, that's how autocompletion works, and so on. So if we have Anna went to the forest and saw and we are looking for the next word, it might be likely or probable that tree is the good answer. Other words like elephant might theoretically fit the sentence, could also be but are less likely, and words like smiled don't fit for different reasons, which is both the content of the sentence as well as the grammatical structure. When looking for the next probable word, it means that we have a model that is already in inference, in function. And to train this model, large amount of text data has been used. So here we are talking about, for the latest language models, most of the text that have been generated by society over, let's say, the last 50 years. So we can well imagine what are the different perspectives and stereotypes that are encoded in there. The idea of this training process is that we are having masked words, for example, here the last word, that is covered, but the answer is known, and the system is trained on all of these millions of sentences in the training data to predict and adjust the model accordingly so that it's able to encode these probabilities, leading to the system that is then able to compose these sentences, be it answers or be it translations, word by word. These language models are then the foundation of different AI applications. Now, the application can be chatbots, they can be spam detection, they can be the auto-completion feature of an email program. So depending on what we want to do, some of the systems are further trained or just using these language models at the bottom of this technology stack. So to give one very famous example, we have the GPT models, which are the language models that are then used by the chatbot application ChatGPT. That is an application that can be used over the web browser and then in the back uses this language model. As said, sometimes these models, they're not used for direct tasks like question answering, but they are used under the hood of applications that, for example, analyze text or do other tasks in the back end of the application. As we have seen before, the stereotypes are encoded in the models, now image generation or also language models. And one typical example where we can see this problem is machine translation. So many of you might have been using different common tools of machine translation. And what we can observe there is that we translate from a less gendered language like English to a more gendered language like German in this example. The system has to make a decision. So the expert in German can be the Expertin or der Experte, so a male or a female version. And there has to be this decision that is again made on probabilities. So what we often see there is that we have a very stereotypical translation of, here the example, classical example of bias research of jobs. So we see here in this example that the expert and the doctor are translated as male, but the nurse and the secretary are translated as female. So depending on which tool we use and also depending on changes within the tool, some examples work better than others and suddenly some examples don't work anymore. But the problem overall is still there. It's still the same. And this is only one example of NLP, so natural language processing application, where we can experience this bias. But this bias is in most of the language models, and it also goes beyond gender and professions, as we see here, because we have all sorts of, for example, associations that are positive or negative with specific first names that we are observing in research. So what to do about it? One thing we do about it is in the context of the bias project, which I will now quickly introduce. So we are looking at the particular case of the labor market in the bias project. We are looking at how AI is used on the labor market, how are these human biases reflected in AI tools for labor market, but also language models in a more general sense. And of course, from the technical perspective, we work on ways on measuring this bias, proving that the bias is there in a systematic way, and eventually reducing it. There are different ways on how you can actually interact with the project. One way is the Bias National Labs, which is a community of stakeholders where people can register and become part of the project and be informed about the different activities we are doing. So we have co-creation activities that we did in the first part of the project, and now in the second half of the project is a lot about capacity building and awareness raising campaigns. So we have a lot of things where you can participate. And actually, we are currently have a capacity building course about shaping responsible and inclusive AI in recruitment that will take place in April, and we are still accepting registrations. It's an online English format. So it's currently open. Feel free to also share this link further. It's primarily addressed to HR people, but it's open to everybody who is interested in this subject. These capacity building modules are based on the different things we have learned throughout the first half of the project. So we are really transmitting this knowledge to the people so they can use it in their daily implementation of these tools and make responsible use of it. Later this year, we will then also promote on our channels a similar capacity building for AI developers. So maybe partially addressing the question of what companies can do. Yeah. So in the BIAS project, we are looking at 3 aspects. I will not give any details here today, but maybe we can also get back to it later in the discussion. We are looking at fairer recruiting methodologies based on case-based reasoning that avoids these machine learning approaches, but uses a more transparent way of doing it. We are looking at reduction of bias in text-based recruitment applications, where it's about investigating to what extent cover letters and CV data can lead to biases in any black box recruitment system that companies might be using. And finally, we are working on bias detection and mitigation in language models and word embeddings, which is related to the problem I have illustrated before, that we do have these stereotypes kind of by design encoded in these models, and that we definitely need to do something about it. So a bit to highlight as a last point the challenges that we are addressing. So on one side, previous research has a strong focus on English, and here we are working with a large set of European languages, including Turkish, Icelandic, German, and several other languages. We are looking at how these methods that have been developed for English need to be adapted to the regional specific biases that are very different, like the migration groups, but also the linguistic properties like grammatical gender. And finally, we are also trying to deal with the problem that GPT models or other tools are completely black box models. So methods that have been used in research cannot be used one by one because we don't have access to the actual models. So thank you very much for the attention, and I will be happy to discuss further after in the Q&A. Thank you.
Bon, je profite elle va mettre ma présentation pour remercier l'organisation de nous avoir ici, pas seulement pour notre projet, mais aussi parce que ça me donne l'impression qu'il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire. Surtout ça, quand je vois la salle aujourd'hui, je vois que des femmes qui sont intéressées à ça. Et ça, c'est bon, mais c'est un peu triste aussi. Et c'est comme une espèce d'une vérité un peu irritante, non? Que normalement, les personnes qui sont d'une position plus faible sont aussi celles qui sont ou qui ont la responsabilité de lutter, de battre et toujours faire comme ça. Donc, bon, je vais vous remercier à tous pour tout le travail que maintenant, surtout aux États-Unis et tout ça, je crois que c'est très important de faire ça. Merci à tous. I will do my presentation in English. So I'm Edward, and I am usually the lawyer in the room, so apologies if this is a little bit boring to all of you. But I want to present a little bit work that we have done with other colleagues, Carlotta Rigotti, that works with me, and other colleagues in Madrid and in Luxembourg, trying to understand law and AI in hiring in the context of the BIAS project. So I'm going to give you a little bit like of an overview of what is AI in hiring, what are these power structures, what is the AI Act, perhaps today it's interesting here, EU rules and co-governance. Now, in today's logged, algorithmic driven world, individuals, all of us, we are constantly being evaluated based on our traits and choices and also our habits in many, many different spheres, in public, in private spheres. And among these, the recruitment and selection processes stand out as a critical and particularly sensitive domain, given the stakes, of course, of the choices and their effects. Now, to streamline the hiring process, employers have increasingly turned out to AI systems who they see, well, a lot of potential to help them work better and in more efficient ways. So right now, there are like systems and tools that they are helping us to create targeted job descriptions, to scan and process resumes. This is like a dream, right? Like you have 1,000 resumes and you want to have the 10 perfect candidates for you. So I get that. Then there's also systems done in interviews and analysis of facial expressions, etc. And then others, a little bit more worrying, that assess the skills and the knowledge that people have, of course, usually with the idea that they may give us a better insight of which is the best candidate. So these systems promise really to optimize processes, time cost, augment the human capabilities, increase coordination among different teams, especially in large organizations, but also it affords flexibility and it is more time and cost beneficial for those SMEs and others. Now, what happens, or the hidden story a little bit on this, is that usually they are systems that they are designed by developers who are trained in optimizing efficiency, so not that much on equity. That AI is deployed by corporations looking to reduce hiring costs, so not that much on ensuring fairness. And that AI regulation, which I'll delve very soon, is shaped by policymakers, but often at the table are the same companies profiting from this AI bias, which happens that then it ends up in the same result. Now, this uneven and tech-mediated relationship profoundly impacts job applicants' autonomy, dignity, and well-being, and masks unlawful or simply dysfunctional practices. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this power structure. These systems, the majority of the times, they rely on data, and we have heard with the different presentations on data sets that they are meant to optimize this single type of decision that usually they do not represent the full society, and that usually they work in opaque ways. So some of the adverse effects that they may have, it may be on structural conditions, so information asymmetry, data protection infringement, biases, inequalities, and discrimination. Now, to give you some examples, for instance, the traditional stereotype that older workers are less energetic, motivated, creative, and productive than their younger counterparts, or like that they are less committed to their careers, or more difficult to supervise, transposed over many years in ageist language jobs ad that resulted in systematic discrimination for certain age groups. Then, when we are thinking about facial recognition-based hiring systems, for many years they were highlighting that men were seen as leaders and women were smiley and pretty, as if you're a man, you cannot be smiling pretty, turning centuries of gender biases in an automated hiring filter. And there's recent research highlighting that there were 50% less chances to being hired if there were like some racist biases in the system. Now, what this tells us is it illustrates a little bit the paradox we are confronted with. On the one hand, we see the benefits of AI systems. Everyone in the room has used ChatGPT to write these endless emails or to respond to students, in my case, that it's too much sometimes. But then at the same time, oftentimes, the social costs are often neglected and also less transparent. So often applicants, they find themselves in the position of informational asymmetry and unequal bargaining power. Now, I don't want to take a lot of time, but just for you to know, the European Union has been trying to make really strong efforts to try to understand how we can regulate these in different ways. And the main piece of legislation that is recently adopted is the Artificial Intelligence Act. And it's a special regulation because, in a way, it's a product safety regulation. It ensures that AI systems are safe, but at the same time, it combines fundamental right protection, which I would say that it's not that a bad idea at first. What is novel about this regulation is that it classifies the systems depending on different risks. There are some categories that the European Union considers as a no-go, others that they are high risk, then others that they have potential risk, and then others that it is considered that they have limited and minimal risk. For the prohibited systems, the European Union wants to prohibit those that they relate to human emotions. This could be examples like workers' fraud detection, reaction monitoring, and so on. One of the problems that I see with this is that at the same time they say, well, it is prohibited, but if it is for the safety and the health of people, then we are going to allow it. Now, why is this a little bit problematic? Because an example could be hiring software that could make reasonable accommodations for people that they have disabilities to detect job candidates' emotions, to change them, or for instance, when a truck driver is sleepy and needs an alert message and so on. So we're going to see that all of the different biometric systems that they're going to be using here and in real time, in theory, they are prohibited, but at the same time, in some other cases, we're going to see that they are important. The majority of the systems that we are dealing with in our case, despite, of course, not all of them being AI, we can expand this more, they are considered what we say high risk. This doesn't mean that they are prohibited. This means that there needs to be a follow-up on a lot of different requirements to make sure that they are used to go. The good thing is that recruitment and selection, it is being part of this category because in a way, this domain has always been traditionally asymmetrical with different forces. Just for you to know, there are going to be different obligations when it comes to providers and employers, which comes with obligations with respect to human oversight, which is a bit strange because I am not very that sure that humans are going to always like to be able to review what the systems have been done. But then also with representativeness, which means that in theory they want to have an increased amount of representativeness in the data that they have. Seeing at the time, I'm sorry because I want just to say two things on this. I just wanted to say that there are like other systems that they are limited and minimal risk. This might be like chatbots that they talk with different workers. And what we understand with this is that the European Union, despite having this risk category, it means that it's going to be incredibly difficult for us to understand which systems fall in each category and what are the related obligations. Yeah, sorry, no, yeah, sorry. I wanted to go to the last slide, only like to say a few words, but I'm so sorry. For the no, attends, peut-être un peu. Sorry. This one. Sorry.
People are leaving.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't hate me. Sorry. No, I'd just like to say like that what are the things that the AI Act is doing or that the things that we are also complementing here, it is that they want to establish a standardization, so a standard. So sometimes this is problematic because it is done by the industry and for the industry, but it could be an opportunity for people like us to step in and to help them reflect how we can contribute to these standards that help us having better systems. that there are, the first speaker was talking about the impact assessments. So there is some instruments in the AI Act called Fundamental Right Impact Assessment, but don't get excited. It is only for those AI systems that they're used in the public domain, and it's, I think, a missed opportunity to make developers and deployers understand the importance that these have. And just to finish, and things that we are doing in our project at the Bias is that there is a very strong component on the multi-stakeholder initiatives, and I hope that you're going to join the project and that we can have a lot of discussion. So that is all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you also from my side for having us here today. So I am Silvia, and I'm also part of the Bias project. As you understood, we are all in the same project. But I will talk about what we did in this work package. So the work package 4, it's the one that is in charge of the social sciences and humanities research. And our main task is to do this ethnographic fieldwork with employers, employees, and AI developers, and especially gather and collect information about the use of AI in recruitment, understanding fairness and bias, and the future scenarios of AI in employment settings. So the countries in which we did this fieldwork are 4 countries: Norway, the Netherlands, Iceland, and Italy. We are a big group. It's not only me. We are 3 PhDs and 4 professors, and Linda is also here today, who is part of this big research. But I was in charge of the Italian fieldwork, of which I will talk a little bit about today. So for the Italian fieldwork, I did a mix of interviews and observations, mostly with people working in the human resources, but then also coupled with the workers and AI developers, and one focus group on the future of AI, which is actually my PhD topic. I will go quickly through this part because it's something that you already heard this morning. I just wanted to set a little bit the stage for AI in recruitment. So we know that there are AI tools in recruitment, but what are they used for? And also Eduard mentioned they can be used for screening, ranking, evaluating CVs, summarizing CVs, drafting job descriptions, interview questions, video interviews, or just simply managing the communications with the candidates. And then I wanted to mention also one way in which it can actually be used from the job seekers side. So there are also many platforms that do targeted proposals of job offers. Some examples, for example, the Scotty AI, which is this chatbot specifically to manage the communications with the candidates, give them information about the process, about the company, about where they are in the process. This joiners, which is the example from the job seeker side, so giving these targeted ads for the job seekers, or tools like HireView, which is doing this analysis of the video interviews. And it's interesting that they actually say that one of the aims of their tool is to reduce bias in the recruitment. And this is not just a HireView, but many of these AI tools for recruitment, they actually market themselves as bias-free and reducing the human bias in the recruitment process. We know, though, that there is AI bias in recruitment. Again, this example has already been mentioned, this very infamous example of the Amazon AI recruitment system that was trained on the historical data from bias, which, as you can see, it's very male-dominated industry, and so it learned to devalue the CVs from women. The thing is that it's also just not that simple, and I'm sure that we can talk about it a little bit more also in the panel. It's not just that if you give bad data to the AI, then the AI will give bad output. That is, of course, true. But it's also important to consider that the data is situated, so it's always dependent on the context, and the developers are embedding their own cultural values into the artificial intelligence. So this is a fun experiment if you want to try. The MIT did this moral machine, which is focused on the example of the self-driving cars. But they ask you to take a series of decisions about who the car should kill, basically, if there is a problem, like should it go straight and kill the pedestrian or turn left into the wall and kill the driver. And you have to make these decisions, and then in the end you can see how you fare compared to the other people who took the test. But this is to show how the way in which you make the decision is very much based on your own values, but then in the end they have to just say, like in the algorithm, they have to just put one of them. So you are really, as it was mentioned before, just deciding on one of the options that you can have, and this can also create unfairness in the process. But now on to the more substantive part of the presentation, which is my experiences from the fieldwork. So this is preliminary because I was just last week to do one final observation in Italy, but these are has been going on for a lot, so we have some preliminary results. The first thing is also, we know this is a growing market. We know that there are many tools on the market, but which of them are actually used? Because it was actually not that easy to find companies that were using AI in the recruitment, companies that would disclose that they are using AI in the recruitment process. That is also one thing. But out of the, so between the interviews and observations, I had 17 realities and 17 companies, and 11 of them use AI in their work for some part of the recruitment process. For example, drafting the job descriptions, screening, ranking, summarizing CVs, which is one of the most common. Employee data analysis, so more into the management of people than the recruitment. AI-powered avatars for training, interviews, transcripts analysis, and then just general writing text, so general use of ChatGPT, basically. But that also has an impact on the recruitment because, for example, it was used to generate the rejection or acceptance emails for the candidates. The main motivation for them is, of course, that it's also what these AI tools bring as an imaginary, that they want to replace these routine, tedious, mechanical tasks. So the things like the screening of CVs, it can be done by AI, but then the things like the interviews and, of course, the final decision of the recruitment, it's something that has to be done by the recruiters, by the human recruiters. The main motivation, again, was to make this process faster and more efficient, but I put a question mark on the actual time gain because it was not a study about time, so I was not there timing them, seeing how much time they were taking to do the screening with or without AI. But my impression is that there is no really a time gain, but is more of a support, a cognitive support to the process. So helping them to remember who is this candidate with the summary of the CV, or doing the screening where they are very bored, it's the end of the day, it's Friday afternoon, they don't have the mental capacity to do it themselves, and so they just ask the AI to do it and then check it later. So it's not really like up to this efficiency gain and time gain in a way. The most important question, though, of course, is the AI more or less biased than you in the sense of human recruiter? This is, of course, a tricky balance. On one side, we had some of the interviewees that said, yes, it can reduce the bias in the process, because actually the AI only looks at objective data, it makes rational decisions, it eliminates personal traits from the evaluation, and also because it follows standardized routines, and so it makes the process consistent for all of the candidates, and so it's based on this idea that it's a meritocratic process, and so if people are judged in the same way, the outcome will be fair, and you will get also more diversity from the process. So they believed it eliminated this effect of the personal preferences, this gut reaction they have in the interviews and decision, But they thought that it was not really useful for the recruiters who are trained to do interviews, but more for the clients or line managers who are also part of the recruitment, but they are not trained in this profession in a way. So they identified them as the biased ones, and the AI could help them. But the other side was that, no, it cannot help me because I am a better recruiter. Humans are better recruiters. Of course, they were very aware of the problem of the historic data and using historic data to train algorithms. So none of the companies that I interviewed used historic data in this way. But still, they thought that AI lacked this contextual knowledge and awareness. And context is, of course, important. And in this case, they understood the personal preferences or this gut reaction sensation as a good sign, something that is coming out of a lot of years of experience as a recruiter, and it actually leads to a better quality in the recruitment process, in the selection. And then knowing the context is also something coming from experience, and it's fundamental to know what candidates to insert in the company. So it's not just about making the right decision based on the job description, but also knowing who is the team, like who else is in the team that the resource is going to join, how is the company, how is the workload, how is the personality in a way that the candidate should have to be well integrated into the team. So just the data is not enough in the sense that they need to also have this interview and personal connection with the candidate. So we know it's a tricky balance. Then how can we reduce the bias in the recruitment? There's bias in AI, bias in humans. So what do we do? So one thing I think is, of course, raising awareness about both the human and AI bias. Some people were also not aware of human bias in that sense. So it's also a first step is to make you aware of your own, of course, and then to see the AI. I think that's the sign that the time is over, maybe. Yes. I will finish, no problem. I will go, this is the last slide. But then one important thing is, of course, to also demystifying the AI. So take away this idea that was mentioned before, that the AI is something that is just going to come and change everything and I cannot do anything about it. But to remind the recruiters that they have actually a choice in what they want to do with AI, what they could do with AI and what not. So to find this balance between the tasks that can be automated and those that should be kept, they're intrinsically human and done by humans. One last point, because I also do this, I have this interest in the future of AI. What does the future hold? There is a lot of fear about AI replacing the recruiters, replacing the jobs, but there is also a lot of curiosity about AI and innovation. And what I observed in the fieldwork and interviews is that this creates a sort of push to refocus more on the human parts of the job. So the idea is that AI will do all of these administrative tasks, routine tasks, and then the people will have more time to actually engage with the employees and think about work-life balance, the well-being of the company. So a little bit, this is not very representative, it's done with ChatGPT, but a little bit of this mix of technology and human empathetic context. Thank you. I don't know if I should leave the thank you slide, why not?
All right. So I think that I will proceed. For now, like what we wanted to do it is to continue a little bit. So we had now the input presentations so that you understand a little bit where we are coming from. And now what we are going to do is like to have a little bit of a discussion between us. But we would very much also welcome anyone that has also comments. And so there is like 15 minutes at the end. But if there is anyone that has a burning question, let's not burn, and you can feel free. But I will start. We talk a lot about how AI systems can reproduce biases. We talk a little bit like of, no, you're saying like they are the bad guys, no, like in this case, like being the AI. But then, Mascha, like you're the technical person then, like in our project. Can we really then code fairness, like if someone that would not have a technical background or they really want to know what can we do about this, like could you explain to the audience a little bit like what is it that we can or we cannot do or what we are trying to do?
Yeah, I think there are different challenges that we're facing with regard to that. So one of the big challenges we have is that this whole thing of fairness, or the notion of fairness and bias, it's normative. In the sense that somebody has to tell us, the IT people, on how you want to implement fairness and what are your requirements, what does it mean if an algorithm is fair. So this can be very different depending on the region we are in, depending on whether you're an insurance company or you're at a trade union. So there are many different perspectives on the topics, which makes it very difficult to face it from the technical perspective. And similar, so this for fairness is usually what we refer to when it's about decision making. But when we refer to the term bias as the bias data, and what is a bias in the answer of a large language model, a question answering system to be very precise, even there we are having discussions. Like, let's consider the prompt that somebody's asking the system, what is a typical job for a woman? Now there's the answer we might to want in view of the future. But there is also the answer that, since the question is what is a typical job, based on the current statistics of the past, what a typical job is. And this is a discussion point on what people want to see implemented in the system. And there it's also not quite clear who has to take that decision. Is it the person using the system? Will we in the future be able to set our own values when using a system? Is it somebody in Silicon Valley that takes this decision? That's all part of the open questions before we can actually go to the technical implementation. So one thing maybe that connects to that is the term bias itself. So as we are using it here, or we are usually using it, it refers to bias in a negative sense. But this is not necessarily the case for the term itself in its origin in computer science or in statistics, is that this bias is actually also what makes machine learning work and all of these technologies. So we want to have a certain bias in the sense that we want, for example, the color yellow to be closer related to banana than the color red. So because of all of these mechanisms and dependencies, it works. What we don't want is the unwanted bias, so the reflection of these societal biases. But technically, it's quite similar, because these are both things that the system learns from the data. And here it gets, again, very tricky, because somebody has to tell us which are the unwanted biases. So maybe this is also something that connects to the legal perspective, bias in the legal sense. Maybe you want to tell us something about this?
So for me, when I usually teach to our students, I always say, can we use language properly? Because we say bias, but in the law we say discrimination. And then there are some tools that they are measuring toxicity. And it's like, okay, but are you toxic or not? What does that mean? Is that a legal category or not? So I see that the industry has been putting a lot of effort to use these languages, that they are not part of any of the regulations that we have, so that they can, in a comfortable position, talk about these biases in the system without having to acknowledge that there are some of these biases that we consider unfair discrimination, and that is prohibited by law. So in a way, as a friend of mine says, it's this is not an issue to discuss, this is a problem to solve, which is a bit different. No, yeah, in the law, if you want me to say two things, yes, it's also the same, no? So we also have positive discrimination and negative discrimination. So there might be some moments in which we want to correct a certain things that happened in the past, and we want to make that happen. For instance, when we want to accommodate certain disabilities at work, no? Or for instance, some gender representation. I think that is what the law describes on this, no? For us, I think that one of the growing and learning moments has been a little bit this, no? When we started getting to know each other, it was a little bit more okay, you just tell me what to do, and then we will do it, we will do a system. But then more and more, doing all of these exercises, impact assessment, trustworthy AI assessment list from the high-level expert group, etc. There are methodologies that are actually meant to be done together. Like, and you need to actually have different people in the room, which comes with interdisciplinary, different genders, the intersectionality we were talking, right? Like, you're not just a woman, you're just a woman and a mother and probably a taxi driver. Like, many things, you know, there are many things that defines you, who you are, where you come from, your socioeconomic background, you're from the south of Europe, you're in Switzerland, etc., that actually, informs the way you see life, no? Because knowledge is situated, as Dora Haraway would say, and this is how we're going to inform our systems, no? So one of the things that we've been doing in the bias system is to really have a lot of discussions on how we can go about this. But this brings me perhaps like to a point that Silvia, what we were saying is that in a way, one of the biggest challenges is proving discrimination in AI systems. And sometimes the impact can be clear to some people. Sometimes this impact is not that clear, but the intent is harder to establish. No, like I do not imagine that someone wants to have the intention to discriminate. Now that you have been doing this work, interviewing the HR professionals, and so, have you found out something about this, like how intent, impact, and how do they assess, and how do they distinguish themselves from that decision?
Yeah, thank you, Edward. I think that it's very, like, I relate a lot to what you were both saying, in the sense that also the way in which bias is understood, in which discrimination is understood by the professionals, it's very different. They usually work very interdisciplinarily together with the developers, but still they have one understanding of fairness of the process or bias that they integrate into the tools that they want to use in their company. So it's very difficult to also allocate in a way the responsibility and to understand the intent, because of course the intent is always like the motivation is that to make the process faster, more efficient, but at the same time they also mask a little bit their efforts to mitigate bias behind just saying that they are following the non-discrimination law, for example. So they are just putting like the at the end of the job description that they accept all candidates, but then the way in which they assess these candidates is not exactly considering diversity and how different people can have different backgrounds and different professional paths. So it's also interesting in that sense to see how they try to allocate the responsibility themselves, because I think that the recruiters, of course, think that developers are the ones who should integrate this diversity, make the algorithm unbiased, and then the developers say, we don't know what that means, we need your help. So it's a little bit of this, back and forth. But it also creates, I think, a false impression that the algorithms are neutral, that they can be something that does not, as I said, consider the personal characteristics of the candidates. But we know that that's, of course, very difficult to create, to remove the human bias, and it's not even something that maybe is desirable in some cases. So maybe I will give the word back to Mascha, so you can tell us a little bit also from the technical side what you are trying to do. So from the natural language processing, how can that be actually used in the recruitment? And yes.
Yes, absolutely. So this was one of the slides I had, but due to the time constraints, we did not really go into details there. So I can maybe say a few words about the two natural language processing components of the proof of concept technology that we are working on. So on one side, we are working on the analysis of anonymized cover letters, because we know from research that there is different terminology and different style used, for example, by men and women when they write such a cover letter. So on the other side, we know that in the models there are certain relations. So we know that, for example, specific career words are more related to male people and family words are related to female people. This is also something we see that comes partially from sources like, for example, Wikipedia. So there are some studies from a few years ago that analyzed Wikipedia and showed that the biographies of women were written in a very different way than from men. So there we have the bias that then somehow makes its way in the models. And this is all very problematic when it comes to any kind of analysis tool or matchmaking tool that relies on these technologies. So what we're looking at there is that we know that there are, even if we remove gender from an application, like remove things like picture, name, the gender field explicitly and so on, the system can quite easily infer whether this application is from a man or from a woman. This works in like, let's say 80% of the cases. So this is problematic because then we think that we are anonymizing it, that we are removing the bias because we're removing the gender component. But actually we are not, because the system might still be picking out the women. So this is something that happened in one of the examples. I think it was already shown earlier. And this is problematic because we think that we are doing something fair, but actually it's still not fair. And there is where it gets quite dangerous. So what we're investigating in the bias project with regard to this part is on one side, these sensitive words that one needs to remove that might be intuitively a bit easier, that we remove things like childcare duties or other things like that reveal the gender or familiar situation of a person. But then we also investigate what we call proxy words. So words that are in the model encoded as male or female and might have an impact, but that are not explicitly to a reader, to a human reader, seem that this could provocate a bias. So this is what we are investigating, and then we try to figure out what to do with these words. Does it mean we have to adapt the incoming cover letters to make the system more fair, or are there other ways we can handle it? Because we wouldn't know what the AI, often black box tools that are used in the wild could be doing with these words. And the second part of the NLP tasks, it's about the language models and word embeddings. So word embeddings are maybe to say it simply, are a bit the models we used to have before the language model we are having today. So it's also a mathematical representation of words and of language that are used in many applications that are dealing with text processing. And there we have exactly the same thing. So because we can measure the relations between words, and there is also where a lot of research has indicated how family words are related to the female first names, career words for male, and so on, for all different dimensions of bias. So here, it's again a little bit tricky because we have to figure out what are the biases we are looking for before we can actually measure them with the methods that we have today. So that's also something we did in the first part of the bias project. We did co-creation activities in all of the different countries of the consortium to talk to people. So there were HR people, workers, NGOs, and all different groups of stakeholders, and we talked to them about what are typical local biases that people experience in these countries, in these regions, and how this is expressed in the corresponding languages. And then we verified how these exact same biases are reflected in the technology. And yes, they are reflected. So the challenge now we have for the second part of the project is to actually do something about it. And this is quite tricky because when we are playing like on a technical level, when we are fighting these kind of unwanted relations in the model, it might have an impact on the functionality and the wanted relation. And it's especially very tricky for gendered languages, like for German or Italian and so on, as compared to methods that have been developed for English, because suddenly we have the gender component on one side in a grammatical way, and on the other side the unwanted gender component. So that's a bit, the overview to that. Maybe you want to say something about the co-creation in particular? Yeah, no, building on this, actually at some point, well, we have like this amazing partner, Sven in Smart Venice in Venezia, that helped us a lot on all of this. I think that one of the conclusions that we got is that when we were writing this project proposal at the theoretical level was very nice and flashy, we got the money. But then we see like how complicated is this. So if any one of
of you is applying for funding or is interested in that, remember that then the operationalization of your ideas and so is going to take time. So just if you want to think that is also important. Now I wanted to say that one of the cool things that then like we started doing is actually to ask people, okay, then how would this magic tool that would remove these biases look like? No, like because we actually do not know. No, and so it was like a little bit like carte blanche. Like okay, so how could you do this? And so like part of the co-creational workshop was not only focused on getting those words and sentences and so, but also like try to capture those imaginaries. Like, do we really need a robot or like it's just a system, or how it would look like? And so, and then at some point, then what we created was a demo that we could, I think, that also share. Like we also do exercises and trainings with this, in which then we would do with different groups. That we would actually make them as if they were the recruiters, and then we would have like to do certain selections and so. And then based on these selections, then the AI tool would help them to select the best candidates. And then they would be like confronted with how the tool that was powered by ChatGPT, like at the time, like was then doing that. And then like we would have like a very much informed discussion about how also do they feel about this. And I think that the goal of that is, or was, to try to map the perceptions of how then, once you are presented with these clear evidence of these systems that really do not work entirely, how does this make you feel? And then what we did then like was also like in a large scale, we did like a very large survey, like trying also to understand how does that feel people, no? Like, do they feel that the systems are transparent, or like, do they feel that they are fair or not? Surprisingly, many people say that a lot of this information that these systems gather may discriminate against them, but they are not that sure that they are going to positively discriminate them, no? Silvia, I wanted to ask you now, like, when talking about these perceptions of AI fairness and so, no? What is it that then HR professionals think about AI fairness? Do they really believe that there is an opportunity? No, because it really is striking when you say like, oh, they think that they are like the better ones, no? Like, can you tell us a little bit more in detail, like about like the AI fairness in the HR context?
Yes, so it was also something that I didn't have time to mention in the presentation, but I think that the first thing also that we investigated in the interviews and observations is not about the AI, but just about the recruitment process and bias and fairness in the human-done recruitment process. And one of the things is also that they have many different ways in which they understand the fairness part, and also in which they implement fairness. So, for example, it can be just taking away the personal information from the CV, or it can be having multiple perspectives in the decisions. So having, for example, a series, not just one interview, but to have multiple interviews with different people. Or it can be also trying to do some positive discrimination, so try to actually integrate and push for some more diverse profiles. But then the way in which they sort of transpose this into the AI, it's I think the most important thing is that they don't really understand how AI works. So they have this perception that it can be unbiased because it uses the standardized process, but at the same time they also understand that it's not, it doesn't have the contextual knowledge about the company that I was mentioning before, and so they kind of in this way then anthropomorphize, the algorithm, and they say, oh, it's just a dumb colleague or the worst intern that I ever had, because it doesn't take into consideration all of these complexities. And I feel like you said you are the lawyer in the room. I feel sometimes I am the sociologist, in that I have to say everything is complex and everything, it's very, intersectional, and it's very difficult to actually grasp the reality of the recruitment process and what is a fair recruitment process, and to then operationalize it into an AI. And this is what we try to do with the project, of course, but it's always very, very difficult. So I think that the most important thing that comes out from this co-creation as well, and the multi-stakeholder engagement is that it's never going to be just the artificial intelligence, but there is always going to be some kind of collaboration, integration between the two, because it's impossible to completely unbias. And as Mascha was saying, the bias is actually useful in AI. Sometimes is what actually makes it work. So yeah, I think that it's very complex. Yes.
If you say it's complex and the lawyer says it depends, what does the technical person say?
Specify your requirements.
Tell me what to do.
So maybe one point I want to pick up here that it's also, it sounds like a minor point, but it's actually quite important, is that we say we are reducing the bias. Because this is also one very important point that we have been discussing very often in the project, because we said from the technical perspective in the beginning, there is nothing like a bias-free system. Just because, for different reasons and for the methods we currently have, is that the training data we feed in this kind of language models, so millions of sentences of text, it's very hard to make them in a neutral way. So the easiest would be if all of us, we just stop being biased in real world, and maybe in 5 years we will have a good sample of training data, which is, of course, very difficult to implement. And similarly, we are having the system and we are having training data that is in an order of magnitude that we cannot just manually review it. And even if we would be able to manually review it, it will be very hard to cover all the different dimensions that bias can take against the different groups. Age, gender, religion, the intersectionality of all of these groups. And at the same time, also all of the different ways how these discriminations can be expressed in language. So I agree, it's a complex problem.
Yeah, I keep saying that with the use of technology, we keep convincing ourselves that we can reproduce, that we can do, but someone said before that it's very much on the simplification of human life. I don't know if anyone in the room has... Yes, I see some questions. Where is that? Oh, a lot. That's great. We have the magic box. Yeah, throw it.
Who was first?
I think in the back.
Can you catch it? Volleyball players are actually be able to make it. Oh, pardon. Thank you so much for this incredibly exciting panel. It was incredibly insightful. And there's two things that I would like to react to. My name is Claudia Vaccarone. I'm an inclusion strategy advisor. I work a lot with media companies. The one is actually, it's more from a personal perspective. I was wondering if you're also if there's also research that is done on the candidates, actually. What is the candidate perspectives, when going through these recruitment processes? And how do we know ultimately, do companies have criteria in place to find out whether, the process yielded to the proper selection, right? Like, how do they know that they actually selected the right candidate? And when it comes to the candidate perspectives, I recently went through a process, a recruitment process, where basically in 4 steps, I only talked to someone at the last step, basically. I was going through loopholes, and clearly AI defined and, tools, video interviews in which I'm talking to nobody, exercises that I need to make, presentations that I need to make to nobody. And then at the end, I finally get to talk to someone and meeting briefly for 25 minutes the hiring manager. So one question that I also have is like, are you considering some generational impacts, are there some generational implications in the way some of these systems are being designed with maybe millennials they're much more technology prone and they're more comfortable. Well, me, a Gen X woman, I'm craving to talk to someone, and I'm gonna have to wait 4 steps later to finally see a human being. It's who am I going to be working with, right? And having that human conversation. So that's one thing that I just wanted to kind of see if it's part of your current research, Silvia, and it's part of the bias project. And the other one is on the language. I'm so excited to discover, this project. I would love to talk because I've been doing a lot of work with media and newsrooms, especially here in Switzerland. There's some multilingual newsrooms. and one that I've been supporting on inclusive language since 2021, and we found out exactly that they rely on some of these like automatic translators, and it's exactly what you said. Like even though the original text is conceived in the most inclusive and respectful way, then translating it in a gender language will bring back in the masculine generic or a masculine stereotyped version. And what's been really troublesome is that I've been trying to have a conversation with the DeepL, with the Google Translate of the world, and they are not really willing to have the conversation. They're not interested. So I'm interested also to exchange into how can we highlight that to the big tech players.
Yeah, I can answer the first part. Thank you for this super interesting question. And of course, as I said, we are doing the research in 4 countries. And in Italy, I took this focus on the recruiters, but actually the focus is different in the different countries. So my colleague in Norway, she focused on foreign job seekers in Norway. So we are also doing like sort of hearing from the candidate side. But at the same time, we don't have any example of actually such a automated process like you experienced, not talking to a person until the very last steps. I would be very curious to know which company that is and what tool they're using. So we are mostly looking at just the screening of the CVs. Like we found companies just doing the screening of CVs. But the thing is that the candidates, they don't always know that this is being done with artificial intelligence, because it's something that I'm not sure from the legal side, but it's a little bit blurry whether you have to disclose it or not, depending on what kind of data, like if the data is treated in a certain way or not. So the perception from the candidates, it's of course that especially if they are getting a lot of rejections, that there is something wrong, but they don't understand what it is, because it's also not that much feedback coming from the recruiters. So what also a little bit from the interviews in Italy I got from the candidate side is that you feel very lonely in the process and lost. And from the recruiter side also, when I was asking them about these AI tools that they were using, the well-being and sort of the experience of the candidates was almost never a concern, was almost never a topic that came up. So it's much from their side, they want to make the process more efficient, but they don't really think about what is going to be for the candidates. And this is not something that comes from our study, but I know that there have been other studies looking at the perception of the job seekers, and it's a little bit of mixed. So maybe there is this generational also component that some studies say, oh, if AI is used in the process, then the candidate thinks this is a fun, innovative company and they like it more, or they think that this is bad, they are not talking to humans, so they don't feel connected to the company and so they like it less. So I don't know what it does to the reputation of the company. I think it's a little bit of a mix, and depending on the sector, the context, the generation. But there is some research out there more on the candidates, yeah.
Yeah, then I can maybe answer to the question about language. So yeah, it's indeed it's a big problem with the automated translation. So we saw it in the slides, and it's actually not that easy to fix. So what we have seen is that some of the examples that are repeatedly shown at venues like this one suddenly then are not biased anymore, but only this exact example. So as soon as we are slightly adapting the example, the problem is still there. It's also partially because the problem is technically very difficult to fix. So in some of the tools, we have the possibility to click on a word and to see the alternatives. And we often observe that the male version is used and the female version of the same profession is actually far behind in the list, among with other male but less related translations. So this really shows how deep the problem is inside. But yeah, I indeed agree that there could be ways to handle it, or at least to propose the different ways, or to more prominently demonstrate that we have an ambiguity here. Please check carefully, or to make people aware of this problem. And yeah, for the last part of the question on how we can convince the tech companies to do that, it's a hard question, but I'm happy to help.
Just to follow up on the previous comment also, I was thinking that I think that we have a little bit of mixed feelings, no? Like, I think that everyone would agree that when you get on the phone and you are hours with an automated system, you really want to talk with someone. But it's also true that if someone is calling you and you do not know the number, you're also like, who is this person? Like, why do they know my number? Like, I don't want to talk with them. Yeah, so what we realized in our project is not only age, but also disability. So like in Leiden, for instance, we've been engaging with the European Disability Forum in Brussels, and the project, we were focusing on gender and race, but I am very happy that the word intersectionality was being said before. Like, this is something that that we understand that it's a limitation, like in our project, not because we do not acknowledge it, but because the focus was specifically on another one. But these are really important points. What I wanted to say, that because now we are in the process of analyzing this survey data that we had, the survey data wanted to, we had like more than 4,700 responses of workers in the EU. So it is true that we do not precisely ask people about a specific tool that they were using, but we wanted a little bit in general, what do they feel? We try to also say, are you sure you haven't used them? Like, do you know that LinkedIn like uses algorithms, that they're powered by AI, and so also to inform about this. And then some of the, I was trying to get the data as quick as possible for you to know. We submitted a paper in a conference. We see in general that AI transparency is lacking. So like, workers often do not know when AI is used and to what extent, or whether their AI systems making employment decisions. 44% didn't realize that platforms like LinkedIn were using AI. Then also, so in general, workers are often in the dark about how, when, and why AI evaluates them, which limits their ability to challenge unfair or biased decisions. Mm-hmm. So that is something that we also do not know, because what happens is that if you are not shown a job ad, or if you are not hired in one of these systems, you never will know whether you've been discriminated or not. They will just tell you, we have so many applicants, unfortunately, we're not processing any further with you, no? Then other data that we have is that AI decision making feels a little bit like a black box. So a little bit on, again, like on the transparency, but then also the power imbalance. So how AI decision making feels unaccountable, and that it can exacerbate some of these balances. Sorry, I'm trying to read a little bit on what we had, but more or less on this. So like we are now like in the main process of trying to extract as much knowledge as possible from this survey that we have, usually in transparency and discrimination, but many interesting also on demographics, also there.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much for the presentation. It occurred to me, Silvia, when you were talking about efficiency, that you talked about efficiency in terms of time that they gained. But I thought, surely ultimate efficiency is finding the right candidate. And that made me think, if we are all throwing our CV and our job description into ChatGPT and saying, write me the best motivation letter, and then the company is using a GPT to analyze that, how much is actually left of the candidate at the end, and how much are the companies seeing their values, their personality come through, their actual motivation for the job, and how much is that affecting the efficiency of the whole process? And then if I can just throw in one last point related to that, did you, in your interviews, hear anything about people reconsidering radically the process of recruitment and saying, given what we are now facing, is this the right way to do it?
Yeah, so on the on the efficiency part, I only mentioned time, but it's also quality of the candidate. But that is very sector dependent as well, because in some sectors, so for example, in the manufacturing, you have to hire somebody that is just working in the manufacturing line, blue collar job. They usually get a lot of candidates, and they are many of them are qualified, they could hire many of them, they just have to pick one. So there it's a matter of time, like you just need AI to help you with sorting out all of these CVs. While if it's, for example, a more qualified job where you really have to find the perfect person that has the right qualification, right experience, then they say that the AI can help you also with this kind of more headhunting side. But I think that it's also something that the quality doesn't relate to the AIs that much. They feel like the AI can help more into the time component, and then they will come in as recruiters to ensure that it's actually a quality candidate, a quality recruit. And now I'm forgetting the second part of the question, sorry.
So did you hear anybody kind of really radically changing the process and saying, is the motivation letter that's gone twice through a GPT the right way to assess a candidate?
Yes, and also the part about GPT. So I think also that putting your CV into ChatGPT and then thinking that that is going to make it better for the AI, it's not really that true in a sense, because also they often use different algorithms. They don't really just rely on ChatGPT. And as I said, or maybe I didn't say it, but they always check themselves. They almost never just look at the AI scoring or ranking, but they always look at the CV and try to understand. So if this never happened, but I think that if they sense that you wrote your cover letter with ChatGPT, it would not be a good thing in their eyes, in a way. So I don't think that there is a risk of completely losing, in that sense, the candidate by using AI on both sides. But it's more like trying to make it so that the recruiter actually can have a proper picture of who are the candidates and then make their own decision. And thinking about disrupting completely the process, there were a couple of people that were mentioning it. They were saying that there are these different movements trying to change. This is really just like in the all 26, just like maybe one or two. But mentioning, for example, a project that was doing recruitment in groups. So they were asking groups of people to create, do a kind of project, and then they were assessing the project, and then within the team that did the project, they were doing some other kind of assessment, but looking a lot on the teamwork and collaboration as a measure to select the candidates. But they also always mention, many of them, not just two, but many of them saying that the HR are one of the people that is most averse to innovation. So how they are very slow into integrating these technologies and changes, and how also changing the recruitment process is something that can be done in big companies that have a lot of resources to give to their HR departments and a lot of time for the HR as well. While if you're in a small company, maybe you're the only human resource worker there, you have to do a lot of stuff and you just don't really care about changing the process. You're just like trying to sort it out. So it's not that big of a movement, but there is some small projects out there. Yeah, thanks.
I'm wondering whether HR specialists also actually use these tools to bring in their normative values. For example, they have their candidates and they ask, well, give me the 2 best women, give me the 2 best men, give me like the 2 best CVs from people with from migration who come from a community. And yeah, I think it may be a question to all of you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I cannot really answer it with a research perspective, but more with what I heard from an informal discussion over the last years with different people. And indeed, I think this is something in the sense that could also be interesting in the sense of a mitigation measure. So that, instead of having these typical negative biases, we could go towards something that is like I have a team where I'm looking for a person that is maybe more active, or here I'm looking for a very analytical person, and to have other properties that might not be discriminatory in the long term. But this is more like a vision than
What I wanted to say is that at some point we had these discussions, like into saying not only like from the HR perspective, but could the system itself say, listen, traditionally you've been hiring this person, but have a look at these CVs and have a look at whether you would like to hire these new people. No, we have, just for you to know, we have in our consortium Farplus, which is like a company in Istanbul. So like we have a little bit of problems like getting access to the data, but the idea was like basically on that, so that it was in that context that we were discussing this. So not only from the human side, but also from the system itself, no? Because we know that, well, we can have limited creativity when it comes to certain of these decisions, but perhaps the system could use these patterns to actually select or to see other people that could have the potential, no, to do that. We have 5 minutes left, so it would be great to listen from another question. I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say a little story about HR and recruiting processes I had recently. It was very interesting because I work with AI, so I have a tool that is analyzing CVs and doing like an automated task for customers. And then I wanted to be opportunistic about it. So I created a board meeting with all the agents. I use AI agents. And I say, okay, look at my CV. Because I had a few issues to find a job last year. And I said, what's wrong with my CV? Like, what's wrong? Like, tell me, like, be straightforward, right? So I had 5 agents. One HR, one was bias and diversity expert, another one was like the specialist of something else. So I had this board meeting with my AIs, and they said something super funny. It was like in the picture, because of the picture, I was too young for the jobs I was applying to. I'm almost 45. So it's not true, but the picture I had to change it and put something else where I look older because I don't know, it was just judging me for being young when I'm old. So that was super funny. Another one was, so I'm Spanish, and it said my name because it's Abigail and it's Hebrew. It said, you sound Israeli and maybe you're discriminated. And I was like, oh, great, like this is fantastic. So I'm discriminated for things I'm not because now the shortcuts are the norm. And then, of course, I can be discriminated for the things I am. So I'm accumulating discriminations.
So, yeah.
Everyone is. Like, you're accumulating the discriminations of the perception of the person that is looking at you. And I think it's very funny because this is not AI, this is everyone. Because if you look at me, you can say, oh, she's this, she's that. But you don't know me, right? So it's exactly how we always operate, I think.
So in theory, when looking at the AI Act, if any one of you is interested in applying or getting to understand the AI Act, you need to know that the AI Act will work always with other complementary regulations. In this case, it will be GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation. In theory, this is not okay, you know, like in the sense that basically we have the right to data accuracy, we have the right to rectify information that is there, and it is unfair and also discrimination, like if there are certain decisions being made based on wrong information about you, and that is extremely problematic, no? Like, because then there is very little ways for you to actually object to any of those decisions, because those decisions have been made on that, no? And there were like, there was an exhibition. We support artists. They were actually putting yourself inside of a box, and they were telling you, oh, you are $1.90 m, and then you are like this fat, or like you're this, and all of the data was actually not correct, no? So like in the idea it was actually to trigger you, how does that make you feel when someone is inferring information from you that actually is not correct? But let me tell you that you're not alone on this. Like, we've been doing some research in our center, like on misgendering algorithms. So we know that gender classifier systems use, misgender users, especially in Twitter. What's funny enough is that when we were talking about gender, we used in our research the 4 dimensions of gender, which is biological sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression. And what it seems to be that the system is speaking is actually the gender expression. So like how system or persons are behaving online, that gives an understanding to the system whether your behavior is more feminine or more male. And then it is proved that gender marketing is a very effective way of marketing and so on. What happens is that in the law, we address gender, being gender and sex together. Usually you're born with certain traits, and then you think you are that person, wherever like the transgender community is different to that. However, we lack this sort of multidimensional focus or lenses to address discrimination. And what happens is that then only by using these other dimensions, we could highlight that there are certain discriminations happening, no? So what, at the same time that all of these projects are happening, and so in parallel, we are getting to understand that we lack tools, methodologies, and ways to really address this, no? So on the one hand, for us, how to operationalize all of these concepts in technical terms, but then also how we can then use other methods that can give us an understanding of whether discrimination is happening or not. Because it seems that if we cannot measure it, it seems that it's not happening, when in reality, that's not the case. Well, thank you so much for everyone for participating. And if you have any more thoughts, comments, join our national labs. And now in the lunch, if you want, we can be there for you. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Mrs. Silvia Ecclesia, Professor Mascha Kurpicz-Briki, and Dr. Eduard Fosch for your presence today. We can applaud them again.